welcome to the PocketGamer.biz podcast Week in Mobile Games, where we discuss the week's news and provide some insights. Craig Chapple, Head of Content at PocketGamer.biz. With me, as always, Aaron Astle, our news editor. How you doing, Aaron? What have you been up to?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thank you. I've finally settled on my next game after Xenoblade. I've decided to revisit an old favourite of mine, which is Fire Emblem Fates, back on the 3DS. But I'm now trying it on the hardest difficulty. So you got normal, hard, and lunatic. About a third of the way through my lunatic run already.
You finding
a
it?
week. One map was incredibly difficult. It took me about 5 hours at the weekend. A lot of
How
retries.
long does a map take typically?
I mean, if you're playing on one of the lower difficulties, maybe like 40 minutes.
That's quite substantially more difficult.
Yeah. One of the things I quite like about Fire Emblem is if a character dies, like they're gone. So you kind of have the trade-off of, do I want to carry on because like this map's gone well, but I now don't have these characters I've built up because they got killed? Or do you accept kind of, I'm going to reset the map and try again and hope they don't die this time, but you've kind of lost your time investment. But then you're saving, you're regaining the time investment you've put into those characters and like the limited EXP and resources you've put into them. So there was a lot of repeats on that map until I did like lose one character, but I wasn't as worried about them. I had one run where I got like right to the final bit and then like my best character died. It was like I can't do the rest of the game without them, so I have to reset now.
You really? I like that. I mean, that is exactly what I do in games. I'm like, well, I could take this pain as it's part of the experience, That's the whole point. That's what the game's trying to elicit from me. Or I could just restart this madness.
Yeah. I'm just concerned by the time I get to the end game, because that's quite hard, even on the kind of normal and hard difficulties. Yeah. And this particular game, the final map is quite infamous, on Lunatic especially. So it's like, if I lose objectively the best character a third of the way into the game, probably not going to fare too well by the time we get to the end.
Yeah, that sounds challenging.
But,
sounds fun.
Yeah, I'm quite enjoying it. It's I've played some other ones. They don't call it lunatic mode anymore. I don't know if that was too controversial. On the Switch, it's maddening mode, which I have done that.
That's quite a good name as well, maddening.
Yeah.
In a way, I think you could call it nightmare or something. Maybe that's not in theme. My favorite game ever is Alien Isolation, and I played that on nightmare mode. Because that's what they call the hardest difficulty. Right. I usually actually play games I usually play games on normal. There are some games where I'm really there for the story. I will just play on easy now. I'm just like, I don't care. It's going to be like a 40, 50 hour game as is. I'm like, I'm fine. I think I did God of War like that, and I think I enjoyed it more because of that.
Yeah.
I didn't just have to repeat something like 20 times. For that particular experience. Alien Isolation Nightmare, that was terrifying. Scary as is. All right, cool. As for myself, I've been away at Gamescom. I'll get to that in a bit, but that was very good. Touch wood, I'm not ill yet. I know some people have got COVID since then, so hope you're all feeling well if you were at Gamescom. But other than that, I've been watching Alien Earth, another Alien thing. And actually, I'm all in on it now. I think it's really, really good. It's only 8 episodes, so I think they've just done 4. The last episode was one of those typical streaming TV things where they're like, everything suddenly quiets down and they just have to set everything up for future episodes. So it's a bit slow. That said, some really interesting character stuff that they're doing with the synths. And they actually did a really good job with that. So it was quieter episode, but also quite unnerving, I guess I would say. A lot of it, which was great. Really good performances. So if you're not watching that, I do highly recommend checking that out. Right. Anyway, back to the games. So before we get into the news, we'll do a few shout-outs for our events. So we just had the Pocket Gamer Mobile Games Awards. Congratulations to everybody that was a finalist. And, of course, congratulations to the winners. It was a really, really great evening. There was about 200 industry luminaries, I guess, in the room. A really good time, dinner, awards, great company. What more could you ask for, really? Congratulations also to Evelyn Herrera for picking up the Rising Star Award and Akin Babayagit for picking up the Mobile Legend Award. Really good night. Upcoming events, we've got PGC Helsinki, October 7th and 8th. Bringing together kind of the whole Nordic region. So we'll have actually a bit more presence, hopefully, this year for kind of Swedish, Danish as well, etc. And we've got Pocket Gamer Connect Summit Korea, October 31st. PGC Aqaba, November 8th and 9th. PGC Summit Canary Islands, December 4th to 5th. I think that's it for the events we're doing this year. We'll also be doing some a top 50 at Helsinki. Stay tuned. And we're doing other top 30 lists for MENA and Southeast Asia. So lots going on. And we'll have some regional reports as well. Goodness me. Very busy. Right. Anyway, news. So I mentioned that I've just been to Gamescom, which was great, as always. I love going to Gamescom, actually. Like, these events, they're like a week long, so this and GDC, it can be quite tiring, but I think it's just such a great time to be able to meet, like, everybody, pretty much, like, in the industry, at least everybody front-facing in the industry. So you get to kind of some real insights in what's going on from the people actually making the games or actually in the games business, right? And a few takeaways. So I was there from Sunday to Friday. So I was there for DevCon, which has now been renamed to Gamescom Dev. Would you believe it? They're actually two separate things. So DevCon was its own business. Gamescom is its own things. But everyone always thought they were just together because the name sounds similar, right? And now it's now part of Gamescom proper. So now it's called Gamescom Dev. I don't know what they're going to do, if they're going to expand it out of that show. I'd be interested to see that, if they do that. But otherwise, yeah, firmly in Cologne, rebranded. See how they do next year. I imagine it will just be more of the same. So I was there for that first 2 days. Then next 3 days, I was at Gamescom proper. Made some good time to see the expo floor, which is really interesting. So it was a really, really fun week. My takeaways, and the first two are literally, every time I do a takeaways article, I'm sure, or if people care to notice, I'm sure if people notice when I write these, two of them are always the same. So the first one I put was the direct-to-consumer revolution grows stronger. And so, like, ahead of the show, there was quite a bit of news. AppCharge was very lucky in a sense that they, obviously you can't time these things like that, but they announced their big funding round of $58 million, which is insane, obviously, just before Gamescom began. So that was big news. Xsolla made a bunch of announcements ahead of the show. SDKs to the Windows Store, the Epic Games Store, and Unity. Aganim had a new live ops and game hub builder. So they're all kind of ahead of the show, letting everyone know that they're there, that they're doing exciting new things. And at DevCon, there was quite a good few talks about direct-to-consumer. Xsolla obviously would be bullish on it. VP of Monetization Products, Artem, said DTC isn't optional anymore, which I guess it was just pretty fair. I mean, if you're a big publisher, you should be doing it. The most amazing comment that I saw was this really good panel that had FunPlus, Xsolla, Apps Flyer, and Crazy Games on it. And so from FunPlus, it was their VP of Business Development, Bob Slin. And he gave some really, really interesting remarks. He's pretty open about how they've dealt with changes on the App Store. And he said that really their push into direct-to-consumer came because as a reaction, or at least it accelerated it, as a reaction to Apple's IDFA changes, when obviously the privacy changes, opt-in, etc. That they were like, oh, well, we better start our DTC. So it's actually really interesting to see like the journey and the catalyst of like Apple changing its rules, so people trying to move away from it. And then now Apple's also in the midst of like fighting for its revenue share. So it kind of shows how much Apple has pissed off developers just across the industry. He said that, so if anyone remembers, for the Digital Markets Act, Apple has gone through a couple business changes to their business terms, and one of them had, I can't even remember how it works. They've got two different tiers now. That's their new system. Their old system was the alternative business terms, or you could just have the status quo. OnePlus actually accepted the alternative business terms, which included the core technology fee, which was a charge of 50 cents per install over 1 million, which could be substantial. He said that for FunPlus, for their 4-act strategy games where they don't drive loads of downloads, they do still drive quite a bit, but not like other genres. They weren't that impacted by that, but he did say things like hybrid casual would be potentially very impacted. So I thought that was really interesting. And just in general, everyone's talking about it. Exotic and Atchard had their booths. A really interesting show. I think there was also a bit of a sense that like now's the time to take advantage, because I guess you don't really know technically what the future holds. In the US, it's all kind of that you can freely link away, but that might not be that way forever. We'll see. And obviously, the EU may be about to accept the new rules. We still haven't heard anything from that, so really should be expecting that soon, some sort of decision. So yeah, people just trying to take advantage of it now. That was probably like one of my bigger takeaways. And obviously, so I've got for my second, Asia's influence on the global games market. So if you're on the Expo floor, you can really just see everywhere. You got HoYoverse, there's Infold Games there, Rafton, Tencent, obviously. They all had like a massive presence. So you could just see, what were the other ones? Some games. I've got Huawei App Gallery had a big presence on the show floor. Samsung was there. A Hypergriff with Enfield, which is an Arc Knight's game. You can just see how much they're trying to make a splash internationally. And then also, I guess, as part of that, how much money they've got to spend on that. I got a chance to speak with Infold, and they make the Love Nikki games and Love and Deep Space. I spoke to them about Love and Deep Space. Interview will be on the site in the next week or two. And one of the most interesting things that they said, and this is the kind of level that Western publishers compete at, is for Love and Deep Space, which made, I think, a few $100 million on the App Store Google Play. It's like a dating sim, really, really popular. They have like 500 people working on that game. I think that includes some of the back-end technology team. But it's like, that's a massive number. And that's just one of their games. They do Love Nikki and the other Nikki games. So that's the level you have to compete at. I think a lot of the examples I used there were China, except for Samsung. But obviously there was Bandai Namco, Nintendo, had a big Switch 2 thing going on. Konami's around. All this is not to say, by the way, Western publishers weren't like missing. They were very much very present. But it's just also interesting to see how big a presence Asian companies had. So it was like really, truly global industry. And then the other thing to add on to that was there was just a lot of anime. Like Arc Knight's Enfield had just so many posters in the main hall that connects to like the other halls, and it was just everywhere was anime. Like whether it was just people in cosplay like that or just other games with that kind of style. So that's proving very popular globally. We'll talk about it in a bit as well, but like Musume that we've mentioned plenty of times on this podcast, like that seems to be doing pretty well in the West. So yeah, everyone loves anime, and I'm a big fan as well.
I guess to your point of how many kind of the presence of the Asian developers, like that kind of tracks as well with like we've talked on the podcast before about how well a lot of those mobile games are doing. And like the last year, I think all of the top 10 like new mobile games 2024 were all out of Asia. So as you say, it's not as if, Western developers aren't doing anything, but it makes sense why that presence is kind of being felt more, I guess, that they're taking advantage of this momentum that's clearly building.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I guess Gamescom's just become a big global show, and it's not like these booths are there and they're trying to get new fans that are not that well known. Like for example, Love Deep Space, and I think Love Nikki was pretty crowded, at least from a photo I saw. But when I was at the Love and Deep Space booth, there's like a lot of fans queuing up and taking photos and really just like happy to be there. So like they've already got these communities in the West as well. So yeah, really interesting. The other two quick takeaways, I'll wrap this up. TV streaming platforms kind of had a big, or like entertainment companies, I guess you might want to call them, that they had a reasonable presence there. Netflix especially. You'd almost forget that Netflix actually has a games division. They had these like big sets. They had a big boat from One Piece, and they had a big kind of set for Wednesday, which if I remember right was like the house, and they had like different sets, or like a living room and something else, I can't remember now, for Stranger Things. And then you just sort of left thinking, okay, well, do you want to show one of your games? I mean, if they did and I missed it, if they did show something, but they're very much focused on, here's our great TV shows, which I guess are all the consumers, not just games fans, right? They're also interested in this other entertainment IP. So that was interesting. The other ones on show were Paramount and Paramount Plus specifically had a booth. They kind of actually had a mix. Of they had like I think some posters for like I always forget what it's called, the Star Trek TV show, not Discovery, the other one. A bunch of their like IP for games, so it made more sense. Disney Plus was there for Alien Earth, but that booth couldn't really make an impact because it felt like it was weirdly it wasn't small, but it felt hidden. And because it's Alien Earth, they can't just have it open up to show everyone because it's like adult, so you can't see anything inside. You could just hear if you went close enough, you could just hear screaming. I was like, interesting choice. But yeah, it was just fascinating to see that intersection of games, TV, and film. And we've been speaking a lot about transmedia, so that really showed itself on the show floor. The last thing is just that things felt, for mobile specifically, really, things felt quite positive in the industry. Or if people weren't like being overly optimistic, positive about what's going to happen with mobile gaming, there wasn't like the negativity, right, that I had felt at previous like Gamescoms and GDCs and other shows, where people be quite open about like the trouble they're having. I'm not saying that the industry is still in a tough place for a lot of people. It is. But I think people are a bit more optimistic, or there's like that realism that's coming through, but that's not like entirely negative and pessimistic. It's just like, okay, we're here and we're trying to do cool things. So those are my takeaways. It was a really good show. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it sounds like it was good.
Did you get a sense of anything from HQ in the UK?
Not a lot, to be honest. I think I saw like 1 or 2 game announcements from there, but it's weird with the events. It seems like we always it's like crazy, so much news coming out it's hard to keep up with, or unless you're there, like from the outside, it's just like really quiet. There doesn't really seem much in between.
Yeah. I feel like there was some news beforehand. Or there's quite a fair bit of news beforehand, and a bit during the show. EGC is always a lot busier, right? Being a lot more trade focused. Yeah, Gamescom is huge. I guess that's the other thing. It was just huge. So many people. It was impossible almost to get through the expo floor. You certainly couldn't do it quickly. Yeah, I had a really good time, and it was a great show. So, Aaron, moving on, what have you got?
First up from me, this news is from last week now, but as we didn't do a podcast, that was quite big news to bring up. In compliance with the Digital Markets Act, Google has updated its external offers program in the European Economic Area. So there's quite a few changes, but effectively it means developers can kind of more flexibly direct users away from paying things in-game. It's supposed to be easier to take them to like a browser page or another app store if they've installed one, or like a web view. But apps that feature links to external sources are also going to be like reviewed for compliance with Google Play's terms, and apparently starting in the autumn, developers will need to like declare the fact that they have external app links. I presume that means on like Play Store page, which Google has argued it's for security reasons, because links kind of taking a user out of game can apparently expose users to serious security threats. Aside from that, the Play Store also now has 2 tiers of fees. So every app is at least going to be in tier 1, but developers can kind of opt into tier 2, and then you get kind of the benefits of both, but also the fees from both. And essentially, this means kind of a higher cost. You take more of a hit on your in-app purchases, I guess, but it will allow you to kind of access a lot of features that you already kind of can before this was implemented, but like being able to appear in recommended and like discovery, search results. The pre-registrations apparently going to be limited to tier 2 as well, and things like Android Vitals. So yeah, apparently if you're only in tier 1, it means you can kind of get away with paying smaller fees, but your game won't be very discoverable. It'll only show up if someone very specifically searches for your game. So it makes it sound like basically people are going to have to go for tier 2 to kind of keep things as they are, but then that means paying for both tiers, which whether it gets any backlash or whether it's kind of expected, Google's going to do what they can to, I guess, make people opt in to what they've been dealing with for years anyway.
I find this, I hate this. So we were talking about this just before we went on the show, because I'm still kind of catching up. So I was looking at this, and I thought, so to boil it down, oh, it's like 13%. And then you pointed out, oh, it's plus 10. Basically, what they've done is they've copied Apple to an extent, right? With tier 1 and tier 2. And then, so it's 10%, and then plus 10% for tier 2, plus 3%? What's the 3%? Is the 3% the initial acquisition fee? It's not very clear. That can't be. Oh, wait, sorry. It literally says so. Plus 10% in that purchase, plus 3% subs after a successful offer conversion.
Is that like subsequent then? Like after the first one? Is it 3%?
No, it can't be that. Right? I don't know.
Or does it mean subs as in subscriptions?
The problem with this, right, is that immediately looking at it, you don't know what you have to do. So with Apple, and I can't remember the word count now, I think it was like over 25,000 words, right, in various different documents that they're not that hard to find, but they're not that easy to find either, to learn the new rules. And it feels like the same with Google, right? I'm looking at this like it's not immediately clear, whereas 30%, very clear, right? That's what you pay, and this to just try and hang on to as much of that fee as possible is not great to me. I know I completely understand why they do it, because that's what they want to hang on to that. They're also public companies, right? They don't want to just suddenly lose those money. But it's insane, and it will probably work because at least it was reported that the EU is going to accept Apple's new terms. So if the EU is going to accept that, like I don't really see the issue with it in that sense. I don't see the issue with this. But yeah, I really don't like it that they've now decided to split up how the fees work and just make things really difficult for games companies. And obviously, there's a lot of very smart people at games companies that can work it out. But especially if you're a smaller developer publisher, it's quite a lot to go through, really.
Yeah.
This is the future. In 6 months, we'll talk about they're doing something else now. Also, it was a quick. They're basically mentioning like scare screens that expose users to serious security threats.
Yeah.
On Android, yeah, the most secure platform on Earth. Anyway, we'll move on. The other thing I want to talk about, huge news last week. I took a deeper look into it this week. In India, they basically announced the Promotion and Regulation of Online Gaming Act 2025, and it was like announced on August 20th, and by August 22nd it had received presidential assent. And whilst there has, I believe, been varying degrees of sort of regulation sort of talked about over recent times, I think, if I'm correct, please correct. I'll correct myself next week if I'm wrong. There was like extra taxation on real money games, right, earlier this year. But anyway, so what this law does is it bans real money gaming, and it does lay some sort of a framework to support the broader games industry. So it's not like India is saying games are horrible, they are bad. It recognizes online games and social games and esports, and sort of outlines a framework. And now a new industry trade body has kind of been set up after this to use that. Although it's weird because I'm sure there is another India Games trade body, so I'll be talking to them about that. But so they claimed that real money gaming, really harsh language in this bill, but that includes, so real money gaming is you literally pay actual money in expectation of a real money reward, right? And that can come in the shape of like card games, like poker and fantasy sports. And the bill was like, this has led to serious social, financial, psychological, and public health harms, particularly among young individuals and economically disadvantaged groups. It also linked what it said was the unchecked expansion of online money gaming services to financial fraud, money laundering, and even the financing of terrorism. And the law comes with significant penalties, including imprisonment for offenders. I think it was a minimum of 3 years. So I took a bit of a look into this. I looked at how the companies are reacting and how big real money gaming is. I've been covering India for a long time, and I'll be honest, I didn't realize the data's all there. I just didn't realize how substantial real money gaming was. If you blanket said India's games industry is worth this, a lot of that actually means real money gaming. So if you think in 2024, the games industry, this is according to a report from IEIC, which also did a report of Windsor Gaming. That's a platform that also does real money games in India. In 2024, India's games market made $3.7 billion. 85.7% of that was real money gaming. 14.3% of that was non real money gaming. So everything else. If I look on AppMagic, maybe AppMagic overestimates, and this is in terms of net revenue. It was a bit high. It was like 388 million. But it actually kind of tracks quite closely to these figures. So I don't think they're wrong. And I just thought that was insane. Yeah, so 3.2 billion basically comes out to 3.7 as real money gaming. And that's what we call India's games industry. I'm shocked. And between 2019 to 2024, $2.8 billion was invested by foreign companies into India's games market. $2.5 billion of that was linked to real money gaming. So basically, you've wiped off billions of dollars worth of investment, assuming this law isn't going to change or be challenged. It sounds like I've been reading comments on it. So these are just sort of off-the-cuff comments from people. It sounds like that would be very difficult to do because it was passed through government to challenge it. Like Nazara is a public company in India. They've acquired UK studios Fusebox and Curve Games. They've been hit hard by this, so it's knocked off seemingly like hundreds of millions of dollars from their market cap. Last year, they invested $117 million into Moonshine Technology, which operates a game called PocketGamer.biz. That game is now, so Nazara said it now holds a 46.07% stake in that company. That game is offline. You can't play it at all. Like, so people that have their money in it, they can still withdraw that. You've invested $117 million into this company, and that company also itself has a lot of employees. It's just offline. I don't know what they're going to do about it. Nazara itself said, so Nitish Mittersen, we had an interview with him a month or two ago, and he was saying how actually they're quite diverse. So if they ever had any issues in one part, they'd be okay. He claimed that the move would have no impact on Nazara's consolidated revenue or EBITDA, but he added it would evaluate the potential impairment of its investment. So this is like serious stuff. And elsewhere, Winzo, which is a platform that offers various games, including real money gaming, they've raised like $100 million in the past. Like over that, I think, and they've had to like cancel a bunch of those games. They've had to shut down a bunch of the real money games on their platform. They've now also very swiftly. I think it's been a long time coming. They've expanded into the US and they're doing kind of short video dramas on their platform now as well. So they're obviously looking at ways to expand out of real money gaming. Mobile Premier League. In its Series E funding round in 2021, it raised $150 million at a $2.3 billion valuation. The year before that, it raised $90 million. They've stopped all their real money tournaments effective immediately. And I think that was... I don't actually know. I think that was basically their main way of making money. Absolutely crazy. And so we had investors coming out. So Anush Tandon, who's with Bitcraft, he's a very experienced leader in India. He called it a seismic moment for the industry, and he actually mentioned this has come in when at least 2 to 3 real money gaming companies were prepping for their IPOs, so to go public. And he said, which is clearly now a thing of the past. So they're going to have to diversify to fight for another day. The Lumakai Fund, which has invested heavily in India's market, he said 3% of its platform is real money gaming. I think they've actually had some exits before this from real money gaming, so that was good timing. But they released a statement saying they're still committed. But yeah, I'm in shock of how quick this happened. I think everyone's been taken by surprise in that market. International investors would have been taken by surprise just literally in a few days. How does that happen? And then I'm also shocked at how much of a growth area this was in India's market, that these companies were so exposed to that, and how much that India's games market was made up of this. So when we refer to it, I think most people would think of, their mobile games are doing really well. But actually what we're saying is real money is doing really well. I'm not going to get into, I think people obviously debate whether this is right or wrong, right? But certainly from an impact perspective, it's pretty devastating and just shocking. Right, on to the final story, Aaron. What have you got?
Yeah, so my other story this week is about Musume, as you alluded to earlier. So it's just over 2 months now since it launched globally, the 26th of June that it released. And it's doing pretty well outside of Japan. Based on AppMagic estimates, player spending on Google Play and the App Store, 57% of its mobile revenue has come from outside of Japan since that global launch, which I'm surprised it's that high. I thought, obviously, they must have been confident it was going to do well to expand it outside of Japan after 4 years being exclusive there. And of course, that means it's new here and it's kind of an old game over there. But even so, Japan is still the biggest spender overall, but the US is quite close behind it in this latest 2-month period. In the US, players have spent 87% as much as Japanese players over the 2 months since it's gone global. So the US is kind of leading overseas spending. Players there have spent 31 million so far, out of 35 million overseas overall. So I think Canada's the next biggest, only 3% of global spending since the launch. Whereas, I say the US has done a lot more, so it's 31 million versus 35. It'll be interesting to see kind of how it performs longer term. It's also worth noting, obviously the game's far from its peak in Japan, but it's not as though it's suddenly kind of fallen off since going global or anything. The majority of spending technically coming outside of Japan isn't as if the game's recently hit a new low or anything, and the spending's also kind of picked up in the second month outside of Japan. It was 50.3% in month 1 that came outside of Japan, whereas now this 2-month average has brought it up to 57%. And again, Japanese spending hasn't declined particularly during the second month, so it is actually kind of gaining steam outside of Japan. So I'm curious to see whether that kind of percentage keeps growing in the kind of overseas direction, or whether the global players fall off and it goes back to being majority Japan again. But as I said, I'm surprised it's doing quite as well as it is outside of Japan. And I've been seeing on my YouTube recommended and stuff, people that I kind of watch for other game franchises have been trying it out, even if it's not their usual kind of genre. Then it seems like it has actually kind of broken into the mainstream almost a bit. Conversely, I was telling a friend last week I haven't seen in a while.
I swear you've done these stories before, and I love these. You're I spoke to a friend about some obscure random gaming thing.
Yeah.
I just love hearing these reactions.
So I spoke to kind of a friend who's less so into gaming. And he was quite taken aback when I was yes, there's this horse girl anime racing game where you train girls to race. He wasn't quite as receptive to it. But I say online it seems to have taken off more than I thought it was going to over here, which is interesting to see.
I feel with anime you can just sort of get away with almost anything because the premise is so ridiculous. But so is anime, and I do love anime.
Yeah.
I guess it works. I don't know what else to say anymore about it. People like it, and like I said earlier, Gamescom anime was a big thing. I don't remember seeing Musume there. It must have been. I can't remember, but anyway, more anime was there, and so people just really love this stuff. Right, so that brings us to the end of the week in mobile games. Thank you so much, Aaron, as always, for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a fun one.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in, listening. Sorry we missed last week. Just Gamescom madness got in the way. Touch wood, we'll be back as normal next week. We'll see. But otherwise, have a great weekend. We'll see you soon. Goodbye.